Okay, so we've been through what the systematic quantitative lit review is. We've been through how you go about being systematic, and we've now been through actually how you be quantitative, how you develop that personal database, put all the information in about the papers, and then use that to generate some tables that allows you to map the discipline, map the gaps, find out where things are known and where things aren't known, what methods have been used, what methods are starting to be used, and where there might be useful methods that only a few people have started to use. And this is really going to help you work out, for example, exactly what you're going to do with your research, because it helps shape that field of knowing what's known. That's part of the whole point of lit review, is getting you to know where we have information and where, in the old map language, we used to talk about there be dragons, those gaps. So that's really good. Now, what you want to do is turn that into a document, into text production. And that can be the text production for the thesis, but also you can produce a paper using this. And as we mentioned before, one of the advantages of this method over the narrative review is that you can use it to produce a much more structured literature review that has an obvious process, and it's actually quite straightforward. And that's what I'm going to go through now, is how to turn it into a paper. Now, this involves drafting the methods, drafting the results and discussion, looking at the introduction, abstract and references, and then revising it and revising it and revising it and revising it and revising it until it's about ready to get sent off to a journal and or suitable to go into your thesis. So as you can see on this, again, it's a sequence of steps. Now, there are a lot of places you can find out a lot of great detail about how to write papers. So I'm not going to go through everything here. What I'm going to do is go through it in terms of the systematic lit review and concentrate on the particular issues or challenges for this method of writing. Now, as you can see, I'm actually suggesting that you use what is a fairly common structure in science. If you're in other disciplines, you can in effect be doing something similar, even if you might not necessarily be using the same headings. So in the social sciences, we've published this using a similar structure. So you've got the abstract, the introduction, the aims, the methods, the results, the discussion, and the references. And that's the order the document's read, but it's really a good order to write. And what I'm going to do is go through how we found is a really good order to write it. And in this case, it's a combination of doing things. One of them is writing the methods to begin with. And often this is because you can start drafting the content for the methods as you actually do the systematic part and into the database. So as you go collecting what keywords did you use, what databases did you use, what were your selection criteria, you should be writing those down as notes and then turning that into text to be the first bit of the methods. How did you get systematic? Then you need to write the text that documents how you went about categorizing the papers, inclusion criteria for the categories, how many categories were there, what were the inclusion criteria for the categories, all of that sort of stuff. So you're going to go through writing that methods, and that's a relatively straightforward. So that's one of the reasons that it's good to do the methods early while you still remember what you did too. So as I mentioned, we've got you to go through and generate those tables. So one of the things you want to do is you can look at those tables, and then what you want to do is start thinking very carefully and discuss with your supervisor, co-authors, whoever is involved in this project. What's the most important thing you found? Now, if you remember at the beginning, we said, define your topic and work out your research questions. Now's a really important stage to revise those research questions, because what you'll actually find is that the most interesting thing you found may not be the thing you thought you would find. When you write a paper, one of the most important points to do is you have an aim when you start, but it's at this point that you say, actually, what's the most important thing I found? Not what I thought I might find. It might be quite different. And you should actually write the paper for what's actually the most important thing you found. So think about revising that. So that's why we say at this point it's really good to write the aims again, because the aims in a sense are your research questions, and you want to make them what you found. So set that out, and often we have an overall aim and then we might have 3 sub-aims of things that you wanted to look at. So community gardens, where's the research being done, on what sort of gardens, what's it found, that type of a thing would be an obvious 3 points to it. Work that out very clearly. And we also suggest that one of the things that's a really good idea is to mind map the actual paper you're going to write. We've found this really, really helps. So work out now, using those aims, what are the points I need to talk about in the results. And we've tended to find that the first thing in the results you're going to write is the geographical spread. So you start off going, okay, this is where there's data and this is where there isn't. That's obviously a first part. This is the type of methods that have been used. Write the text to that. You've got the tables for it. This is the type of subjects that have been analysed. What sort of gardens? What sort of types of shark tourism? What sort of types of birds tourism activities have been assessed? Then you go down to work out what have they found. So what did the research demonstrate? What were the variables? What were the results? What are the key things? So in effect, you have tables here and you have text here matching each of those. And so it's quite a structured way of putting it together. And remember in that, keep in mind what we call the golden thread, the whole aim or point of the paper and the thesis. And that's going to be what you need to be making sure goes right up front. Then having done that, you can go to the introduction. And in the introduction, in science papers, they tend to be fairly short. In social science, they tend to be a bit longer. But they're often in science 4 to 5 paragraphs. And this is one of the most important things that people have difficulty with. It's an argument. So as you can see, the point is you're getting this beautiful triangle of this laid out argument from the most general, next down a step, down a step, down a step, till you get to your aims. So that the critical thing is when they get to the aims, the audience reading the paper goes, yeah, I want to know the answer to that. And they've had a little bit of background, but nothing that's not directly relevant to the aims. If you tell them about something else, they'll go off and think on a tangent you're going to do something you're not. If you don't tell them enough, they won't understand why it's important. They want to know, yes, that's important, and I want to know the answer. That's a beautiful introduction. That's the way you want it to go. From there, so you've already written aims, well, methods, aims, results, introduction, discussion. Now, sometimes people have troubles with the discussion because it's a less structured. Often you might be a bit exhausted. You want to bring it all together. But a discussion is what's going to make it a really important document. And I know it sounds simple, but it's amazing how often you can forget this. Discuss the literature. Discuss what you found in relation to the literature. So often I find a good way to start the discussion is to actually restate the aims, which might have been hypotheses, actually as answers. So you say, there are a large number of studies on community gardens in a diverse range of places, looking at a range of issues done by people in different types of fields. However, there are important gaps. So you're now giving it as an answer to the audience. And that's a really useful way of doing it. Then you're going to go through and discuss the scope of the literature, the geographical spread. What are the implications of that? What does that mean if you've got this issue about where things are done and what they mean? What's the type of methods are used? Are they the appropriate methods? Should there be different ones? What's the implications of certain biases or concentrations in the methods to what may need to be known, or how reliably we can utilise those results? Same thing for the subjects, same things for the response variables and what they've found, that type of thing. You also often will discuss the limitations, and obviously one of the limitations is going to be the gaps and highlight why that affects what we can say. So classically with this systematic quantitative literature review, and one of the ways it differs from the narrative and the meta-analysis, it says, yeah, we know a lot about this, but if we base our judgments on what we know, we have a problem is what we don't know. And in this case, for example, on the research on community gardens, well, that was a really important result, because what we ended up finding was that most of the research was done in North America, and most of the research in North America was done on what are called Rust Belt industrial cities. And so they were looking at community gardens and crime prevention, community gardens and community building, community gardens and different ethnic groups, all sorts of fascinating stuff. But the message from those gardens and what was found isn't necessarily going to be the same as if you had done that work in Beijing or in Sao Paulo or in Lagos or in Australia. So this is what we mean about the need to highlight the gaps so we can know how much we can rely on the conclusions of what is known by what's not known. And that discussion is the place you can make that really, really important points really clearly and subtly lay out what you're going to go do your research on and justify it. Perfect. Then, final bit that we tend to write, I mean, you've got the references and all of that, is the abstract. And the abstract is the bit that I write the most often. As in, I write it and I rewrite it and I rewrite it and I rewrite it and rewrite it. Because usually there's quite a tight word limit and you're trying to get as much information to that abstract as possible. So it's really important. You want information on why the study is important. You want information, a little bit the summary of the introduction. You want it on what you did, the methods, what you found, the results, and the discussion. You want to say why it matters. So write the abstract, rewrite it, get it sharp, trade fewer words, more content, play around with it. It takes a long time. Then get the references right. All of those mechanical parts, layout of the tables, the figures, choosing the journal, all of these types of things. The final thing we want to talk about with it is once you've written it, you're going to need to rewrite it and rewrite it and rewrite it. And generally, the way we find is the first draft or first drafts is for the writer to get the information down. It's, okay, here's the information, I want to make sure I've got all the information in there. Second draft is to try and word it better, trying to get it so somebody else who doesn't know what you did can understand it. Is this the most logical order? Is the best way to explain how I selected keywords, how I chose which databases, what my selection criteria, what the implications of what I found about the geographical spread? It's about putting yourself in the mind of the reader and seeing if your text, because that's the only thing they have, conveys what's in your head, what you want them to know. Is this the medium is succeeding in getting the message? And then after that, the later drafts are about polishing. It's getting it shiny and nice and beautiful and smooth and no errors and all the references right and the structure perfect and the word limit right and the formatting and everything. And that can often be backwards and forwards with your supervisor or other co-authors and getting that shiny. So we find that often it may take many iterations, often 9, 15 type edits backwards and forwards to get it just perfect. And then it's ready to submit. And hopefully at that point you can sit back and think, my gosh, look at this. I am now knowledgeable about this field. I'm no longer a novice. I now have written a systematic lit review. I now have a database that I can update doing my PhD. So when it comes to write the discussion, and as I do my research in the discipline from now on, I don't have to ever go back and reread 300 papers or 500 papers again. What I have to do is go look at my database, work out which of the 10 papers I need to do. Which are the ones that make this point? Which are the ones that do something different? This is why it's a method with benefits. It gives you all this, you've got this database, and you can go back and mine and use that database. And you've now got a document that is making an important contribution to the discipline because you've done something different to what's been done in narrative reviews and what's been done in meta-analysis. You have now contributed to knowledge by highlighting where things are known and the gaps. And that's fantastic. So good luck and have fun.